We're so done with new year, new you. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
Something to ask yourself is if this year was a case of mistaken identity. Guys, welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, up your you, and also know your you. I'm your host, Isaiah. It is the last week of the new year. Well, last week of the old year, and we're stepping into the new year. And this is the last podcast episode of the old year. And I was thinking about something. It's just something I kind of think about in different variations every year. Is, did I do what I said I would? Is this year what I expected it to be? Okay, did I accomplish what I desired? Did I experience what I desired? Or is it a case of mistaken identity, right? The goals that you set last year for this year, were you included in those goals? Okay, and when I say were you included, is sometimes we are not really aware that what we are desiring to be an outcome, we are actually demanding that we be a different person in the process. And our goals and our grind or our interests or, just what we value don't always align. And there can be a lot of disappointment that comes with that, right? And even in relationships, something I've been hearing so much recently, and it's just wow. Maybe it's just, I don't know. I think it's just a more common thing, is how much people are falling out with their friendships, specifically. We hear about breakups all the time throughout life. You hear it in music, you hear it in movies, like breakups. It's always the talk of the town. It's common. It's encouraged, right? It's an ability to share your experience with another person. But when it comes to friendships, the falling out of friendships, it seems kind of like an underground club, right? Where you're not really able to talk about these things or the experiences or how they impact you, right? So it's like a secret society for talking about the fallout of friendships. However, it's becoming more streamlined, right? More people are starting to talk about it, not even gender specific, Typically, you would hear women talk about how they've lost out on friends and how hurtful it's been and just how devastating it is. But guys are now starting to talk about it too, where it's like, oh man, I never expected that this guy that I've been friends with for God knows how long, we are no longer homies, right? Our relationship kind of hit its point. And then you get into the kind of interwoven aspects of it where people are talking about, well, I don't know why it happened. It just out of the blue, they just stopped talking to me. And I never really think that is a full truth. Because to stop talking to someone is an active choice. It's not a slip up, right? And to continue not talking to someone is an active choice. It's not a slip up. So when we say we don't know why somebody just out of the blue stopped talking to us, a lot of times there's information there. It could be them, or it could definitely be us. And it's something we're blind to, or something that we may not be willing to accept. Okay? But in all of that, sometimes it is mistaken identity. Okay. Sometimes you may not have realized that either you saw yourself as a better friend than what you are, and or you saw this person as a better friend than what they are or what they were willing to be. Okay. And there are so many loopholes in terms of what constitutes a good friendship. And a lot of times, if you listen, there's a lot of permission to not be so good to other people in those relationships. And that just lends itself to confusion, that lends itself to frustration, that lends itself to a difference in value and opinion, and a lot of unspoken wounds uh, show up in the connection, right? So sometimes it's just like, oh, was it a case of mistaken identity where I thought that we meant more to each other than what we actually do? I maybe have put you in a place in my life that you were not supposed to be in. Maybe I inserted myself into your life and I overthought my significance of myself in your life. Why? Because of all the history and the things that we did together. And I think the more that you start to um, just unpack and really lean into what your own habits are, what your own disciplines are, but also the patterns of relationship, you may realize sometimes your relationships are cases of mistaken identity where you thought somebody was who they are not, and you thought that you were somebody that you actually are not. Stepping into the realm of people pleasing, right? Sometimes, or a lot of times, people pleasing is the result of trying to be something that somebody would like, which means that you were doing a lot more of what you probably don't like, which means that at the end of the day, it is not you showing up in these spaces. Okay. There's a lot of times we may make the mistake of identifying ourselves as something that we are not, right? To say that you are a thoughtful person or you're just a giver and all this. Sometimes that's a case of mistaken identity, okay? You mistake what it means to be any of those things and you think that what you were doing is healthy. You think that what you were doing is appropriate. You think that what you were doing is supposed to be receptive and is not, okay? You may align with certain people's behaviors or appease their behaviors because you want to keep them in your life, but it's a mistaken identity because what you think is actually okay may not be okay with you at all. And then when it comes to your goals this year, what did I say I was going to set out to do and change? And how much did I actually notice in terms of my changes? Or does this year feel like it was a year of very similar events in contrast to last year? It was the same exact thing happening over and over again. What we need to understand is like, I don't care if you have a 9 to 5. I don't care if you've been in a relationship for a very long time. I don't care if you grew up in the same town and you never left. No 2 years have to be the same. And honestly, no 2 days even have to be the same. That is kind of contingent on you. It is not to say that every day has to be completely different. Because for me, I love consistency. I am a creature of habit in certain ways. I truly do value consistency. However, I am a very dynamic person, right? Which means that I am still willing to incorporate new things, new experiences, new lessons, new ways of operating into my lifestyle, especially if it helps me to grow. So you can have both. You can have a very dynamic life with a certain level of consistency, right? Consistency and complacency are not the same, okay? And when you understand that, I think it will lend itself to you having a healthier understanding of what it means to have goals, what it means to be successful, what it means to be happy, okay? Because you don't completely limit yourself and you don't force yourself into a box that you probably don't belong in. Okay. We are not fixtures in the world. We are moving parts constantly. If our bodies are not moving, our brains sure as hell are. Right? And you're allowed to do something with that information. I want you to ask yourself, how many times was I scared this year? Okay. How many times did I make it a point to put myself in positions that challenged me to grow? I had some very interesting moments this year. Very interesting growing moments this year. And this year has been so quick for me personally. In my head, I'm like, this year ended as quick as it started. You know, the beginning of this year, there was so much that I had desire to do. And I did those things, right? I did those things, but it's funny because a lot of these things required a lot of my brain power. And a lot of these things required my focus. And the way that I was able to achieve a lot of those things is that I didn't really have too many external distractions, even when it came to my relationships, right? One of the goals this year was to solidify and really ground my connections. Some that I've already had. The goal was to just enhance them more, right? To not get complacent in this idea of just because we've known each other for this long, now we backslide, we get lazy, and we don't really put forth effort into our relationship, right? Every year that I grow, you grow with me. That's the goal. We grow together. And even if we are growing in different aspects in our individual lives, we are still very much a part of each other's lives, right? There's something that I hear a lot when people say, oh yeah, you know, everybody has their life. Well, if somebody is in your life, they are a part of your life. There's no such thing as a separate life. And I think when we understand that, we can recognize it's like, oh yeah, we are doing life together, right? And we have different sections of what's going on, but at the end of the day, our lives are incorporated into one another. We are a part of each other's lives. That's what it means to do that, right? So this year, my focus and my goal was very much, what do I want to happen? What do I want to change? Okay, what do I wish to say the same? What do I feel uneasy about? What do I feel safe about? Okay, what do I feel confident about? What am I a little uncertain of? And every time those moments popped up for me, I was able to recognize and understand, okay, am I going to change this thing or am I going to keep it? And if I'm going to change it, what does that change look like? You know, and some changes we will try to resist, but they will inevitably show up. Okay, you can't really, you can prolong a change, but if you prolong that change, you will start to notice that if it's a relationship issue, for example, that relationship becomes more radioactive, if you will. Like every little thing becomes something explosive, or every little thing becomes a bigger offense. And you may not know why. It's like, why am I tripping over this little thing? Or why is this person tripping over this little thing? The reason why is because there's something that needs to change that is being forced not to. Okay? And in your life progress, sometimes you'll recognize that too. You will start to become very sensitive or delicate to complacency. If you are looking to change, or if you're saying that you're willing to do something different, you become prickly. You become very sensitive to a lack of change. You become very sensitive to things that are said, to what's going on. Like your tolerance for things, if you are actually looking to change, will not be as high. Won't be as high. Okay. And even where you want to be, okay, how you spend your days will start to look and feel very different. Sometimes your identity is in your willingness to do things differently while holding on to who you are. That's your identity, okay? Your ability to be a dynamic person without changing who you are, without suppressing who you are, okay? Without abandoning who you are to see a different outcome. And I think when you can hold firm to that, it will help you navigate these years, because life is short, right? We say it all the time. Life is very short, but it could be such an amazing experience. I know for me, these last 7 years, if I think about the last 7 years, oh man, there was no 2 years have been the same. No 2 years have been the same, remotely close. Okay. And some were a lot harder than others, but there was always something to learn. There was always something to experience, right? There was loss, but there was also gain. Okay, there was improvement upon myself. And while some things stayed the same, there are a lot of things that had the space to just change. Change doesn't always feel comfortable, but it can still be necessary. Okay. But one thing I always paid attention to was, who am I? in all of these experiences? Am I aware of myself? Okay, am I getting far from myself? And the way you know whether or not you are standing firm in who you are versus trying to be something else is, again, how frustrated you feel. Okay. Last week I talked about resistance, right? When you are resisting yourself, there's kind of like this oppression. The way I like to think about it, I feel it in my chest, right? I feel it in my stomach. Okay, I feel it in my energy. My body is just not, it doesn't feel like me. Okay. And sometimes it'll show up in other places. Like if you notice that you have certain like pains in certain areas, that could be an indicator. All right. What's going on in my life right now that's stifling? Okay. That's not okay. You know, there have been times where I realized I was holding on to certain things or people and I had back issues, right? I was noticing a lot of pain in my back or a lot of pain in my shoulders. Okay. And metaphorically speaking, it'd be like, all right, cool. What are you carrying that you shouldn't be carrying? All right. What has you bent out of shape, literally? And when you can recognize that for yourself, I think you can be a little bit more honest about what it is that you're doing. And you also get to ask yourself, how often do I fear being with myself so much so that I'm willing to be in the company of people who are uncomfortable, who are unsafe, who are inconsistent? And we could always point the finger, right, to somebody else's inconsistencies. But truth be told, when you are showing up in that space, that means you are also going against your own standards or compass or value system. Okay? You are not identifying with who you say you want to be. And maybe that's not you. Right? Sometimes it's okay to be like, yeah, maybe my standards don't align with who I actually am. Maybe my goals don't align with who I actually am. It's a desire, right? It's a thought, which is dope. But maybe it's not exactly who I am. And I notice that because it keeps coming up, but nothing keeps being done about it. Okay, but also recognize if it keeps coming up and you feel this constriction, then that's probably an indicator that you are resisting what you need to do and be to fit into another space, to fit into another relationship. Okay, you are not being fully honest with yourself. All right. So I want you to move into the new year with this idea of, what is my identity? Who do I say that I am? Okay. Who do I say that I am? Who do I think I am? And do I show up in the world like that? And then when it comes to my goals, who are these goals for? How do they align with me? How do they align with somebody else's expectations? How do they align with what I think is successful, what I think is beautiful, what I think is attractive, right? Where do these goals fit? Okay. And then my idea of success. How do I identify with my idea of success? Or is it somebody else's success and not my own? Okay. Once you take the time to understand what your identity is, it'll be a lot easier to identify what aligns with you. And it'll also be a lot easier to identify your inconsistencies and how you pursue these things. All right. And then when it comes to your relationships, make the habit of seeing people for who they are. See people for how they show up. See people's imperfections, right? Appreciate them for it. They don't necessarily need to be bad people, but see people for who they are before you put this identity on them that they probably didn't ask for. And yeah, there may be some people who benefit from how you are showing up. Okay? Is it reciprocal? Right? And are you doing this because the relationship is balanced, or are you doing this to balance out the relationship? Okay? Really think about your identity moving into the next year. It's so many years to come. Think about your identity in life. Who is it for? Ask yourself, when I think about myself, who am I for? Am I for myself, or am I for the approval of other people? I hope you guys have an amazing New Year celebration, an amazing New Year ritual, some tradition, and just a moment to recognize I made it another year. And that can be a challenge in itself. And that's something I need to be proud of. And that's something I need to take heed to. Okay. Moving to this next year, understanding what is my identity? What do I want to identify with moving forward? And you go from there. Okay? Take care of yourselves. Please take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take flight. Happy New Year.